Hi, this is Joe and welcome back. This video we're going to be doing a little maintenance on a Milwaukee corded angle grinder. Tell you what the problem I was having and how I fixed it. I've been using this grinder a lot over the last year. It's about 5 years old. The locking mechanism that you push up here to lock the spindle to take off and replace any type of cutting wheel or flap wheel was not pushing very well, and it was interfering, and I wasn't able to. I had to push really hard to get the in this case the flap wheel off. So I took it apart and found out what the problem is. So and then what we're going to do, we'll do a little maintenance. So let's take it off, take the wheel off here, and we'll do a little disassembly. Okay, and this locking mechanism right here is actually a little pin that pushes up into, and there's two gears in here, and it pushes in and it locks in on one of the gears and keeps this from turning, so you can again loosen or tighten whatever you're putting on the end of the angle grinder. And there's 4 screws here. So let's go ahead and disassemble this now. The more I was using this, the tougher it was to push down that little pin and loosen the nut on the spindle of the angle grinder. Okay. Also, if you look in the instructions that came with the Milwaukee, it doesn't mention anything about lubrication, types of lubrication, or how often. But if you look really close at the diagram of the exploded view of this angle grinder, you will see an indication of what type of grease to use in this gearbox right here. This actually is a gearbox. There's a change of direction. The electric motor rotates in the housing here, and then there's a gear change to, of course, rotate the spindle that way. Okay, now I've taken the 4 screws out. Let's put these off to the side so we don't lose them. Now, when you pull this off, be very careful, because underneath this, on this housing cover, there's a little O-ring on there, so don't lose that. What that O-ring does is it keeps dirt and grit and whatever from getting inside of this gearbox, so keep an eye on that O-ring. If you notice here, this is part of the gear right here, and inside, if we look inside, you'll see that there is the other gear, the rotate the motion from vertical to angular. So, and if you look in there, the grease looks pretty bad. What was happening is, here's that push pin right here, and as you push it, it again locks in to, there's some little detents on this housing cover on this gear. It locks in and then keeps that from rotating. What I found was there was a crusted up, dried piece of grease in, and it was preventing this from pushing up against this housing and gear. So what I did was I took that, got rid of that grease, and it then was able to properly function. But this grease, looking at it, it looks pretty matted up, and it looks pretty dirty, and it also has a smell to it, like it's gotten hot. And according to what I've read out on the web, you're supposed to, if you use your grinder on a regular basis, about every year, you're supposed to change your grease. Okay, so I have some paper towels here. We're going to clean this out, and we're going to talk about what type of grease you should be using in this grinder. There's a grease specification called Nlgi, and we'll talk about that in a minute on what those what that means, and there's a numbering system from 0, 0 to 0 to 1 to 2. Your traditional wheel bearing grease that you pick up at, let's say, the auto parts store is a Nlgi-2, and that's a common wheel bearing grease. You do not want to use that grease in the grinder housing here. So I'll have a little clip here that explains that. What we're going to do is we're going to take the paper towels, we're going to clean this grease out, clean up the housing, we're going to put in some new grease, and then we're going to reassemble this. So let's take a look now at this little video clip on the different types and ratings of grease.
Let's take a look at the Nlgi rating. Nlgi stands for National Lubricating Grease Institute. Sounds pretty greasy to me. They regulate the consistency or viscosity of oil and grease. The viscosity of the oil is selected depending on the speed of the gearbox. The higher the speed, the more liquid the oil or grease should be. Let's take a look at some examples here. Drills, hammer drills, jigsaws, where gearbox speed has a low rotational speed, Nlgi-2 is used. The grease is soft. If you go into any auto parts store and look at the grease, this is the grease that is usually found most regularly. It's used for wheel bearings. Let's take a look at the next category. Lightweight rotary hammers and impact drills. The rating is Nlgi-1. Grease is very soft. Okay, this happens, this next rating is what we're using in our Milwaukee angle grinder. It's used for angle grinders, circular saws, lawnmowers, Nlgi-0. The grade is semi-liquid. And heavy drills, jackhammers, Nlgi-00. Grade is liquid. So hope you've been educated here.
By using some paper towels and a little bit of compressed air and a small device, I used a little pin punch to get in with the paper towels and wipe around in there. Then we blew it out with some compressed air. So now we're ready to put some new grease in the housing. So we're going to put some, if you notice, I don't know if you're going to be able to see this, but there's a little passageway right here where this spline gear is used to convert from a rotary motion to the other direction with this gear right here. So we're going to put a little grease in this shaft, and we're going to pack this little passageway here with some of our moly coat, and then we're going to put a little bit of grease around the other way. I'm going to put some grease on this gear, but I'm assuming it's going to be thrown out as you're using it, so I'm going to pack some extra grease in here so it will pick up grease from time to time from the surroundings. So let's go ahead and get some grease and pack this housing here with the grease. And I'm just using a little plastic epoxy stick. I'm trying to put enough grease in here so if the grease does get thrown off this wheel, it will then pick some additional grease up from the cavity in the housing. And then we'll take and rub some grease on the actual splines here. Let's clean up our mess here. Plenty of grease for the next time. Make sure that the O-ring is on there. We don't want to lose that O-ring. We've taken and put a little bit of grease on that O-ring. We don't want that O-ring drying out and cracking. So a little bit of grease on there should also act as a good seal. So let's go ahead and put this back in. What you want to do is put the cap on and then rotate the shaft until it clicks, and then that will mean that it has made contact with the gear in there. So at this point we can go ahead and put the screws back in. Then we can reassemble the grinder. Let's go ahead and put the flap wheel back on. And let's test out our... Notice the locking. It goes in and falls, that pin falls into one of those detents, and it locks the spindle, and then we can come in and tighten it. I've just taken a damp rag and lightly wiped the grinder down to get all the crud off of it. Again, don't use compressed air to blow around the commutator area down here. And there we go. The grinder's ready for use for another year. I hope you enjoyed this video, and we'll see you next time.